All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Vector Podcast. It is wonderful to be here with you all. My name is Christian Perez, and I am your host. And now we've been gone for a little bit because it's been particularly busy between AWS reInvent 2025 here in the beginning of December and just a series of projects that we've been working on. But we're back, and we're particularly excited because today we have a very special guest with us. His name is Daniel Gaina. Daniel, will you please introduce yourself, let the audience know who you are and what you do?
Thank you very much, Christian. Hello, everyone. Lovely to be here on the Vector Podcast. My name is Daniel Gaina. I'm a senior cloud engineer based in the UK. I'm currently an AWS community builder, an AWS Golden Jacket, and I work for a fintech company.
So Daniel and I, we met at reInvent, and there's some people who really stand out to you because of how involved they are in their community, because of how involved they are in their field, in their area of expertise. And something like, just Golden Jacket. As a matter of fact, why don't we just start there? You mentioned that you are a Golden Jacket, you've earned it. So what exactly does that mean so that everybody has a good idea?
So yeah, I'll talk a bit about how I build up towards and what it is a Golden Jacket and so on. So I started in IT from a non-technical background. So that meaning I haven't been to a university to study like engineering, computer science and stuff. I've done mechanical engineering, but not like tech. So when I joined IT, there were a lot of people talking about the certifications that help you gain some of the knowledge in IT. And some people can see it as equivalent to, like kind of a university. So then I started with cloud providers in general, because at that time I felt like there was a lot of like boom on the cloud, and there still is 5 years later. There's still a lot of like year-to-year growth in cloud infrastructure and cloud spending and stuff. So at that time, I really knew the big three players on cloud, so AWS, Google, and Azure. So then I had to choose one. My choice was AWS because they were the leading one. I believe there still is, with most of the companies have infrastructure on AWS, on Amazon Web Services Cloud. And then based on that, I started studying towards those certifications because I kind of felt the need to overcome my lack of, like technical studies with the certification, which really helped a lot because they teach you not only the theoretical knowledge behind it, but also gives you the opportunity to do some hands-on practice with the knowledge that you gain. AWS has some generic certifications, but they're called associate. And then based on that, as you learn more, you progress towards the professional ones, which are harder than the associate. And then you go to the specialty ones, which are designated specialty towards certain areas like machine learning or networking and so on. And once you achieve all of them, you get this achievement, which is called the Golden Jacket, which kind of some sort of recognition that you earned all the certification as you go along. So yeah.
One of the things that I think you pointed out, which I think is critical, is you can become incredibly successful in these areas without necessarily having to spend lots of time and lots of money in dedicated institutions to teach a certain thing. A lot of these things can be earned and learned through self-study and just genuine dedication. And granted, I mean, having a Golden Jacket, that's what, am I correct in saying it's 12 certifications total or 13?
I think they're all the certifications available at that time, right? I think sometimes they're 12, sometimes they're 13. It depends if they add a new one and so on. So yeah.
Perfect. So all that to say, though, you're still talking anywhere between, let's just say 12, 13 certifications,
correct,
all obtained, which shows not just a depth, because we're talking about, going from, foundational to associate, professional, specialty, but it also shows a huge breadth of knowledge because you're spanning everything from, from networking and now they call it cloud operations, all the way through machine learning, data engineering, and the newly released generative AI developer professional certification. So there's just this massive breadth and depth of information that you're having to learn and prove and showcase that you have mastered to some degree. So you have a lot of individuals who are actively trying to showcase their talent without necessarily dedicating so much time and money at a dedicated institution. Would you say that you achieved that level of depth and breadth just through the pathway that you took?
I believe that I did achieve a certain level of depth. However, tech is a very vast territory. So I feel like it's a lifelong pursuit, that there's always something new to learn and there's always something better and so on. And I feel like usually certifications doesn't make you really an expert. It just gives you enough awareness of certain technologies, certain topics, certain features on AWS, for example. So it's more like it's up to you to just continue developing skills into that area if you want, and just, like become even more in depth of the particular subject they study. So yeah.
So I think that's a great distinction that you're making there, because so you mentioned that there's multiple cloud service providers, and naturally these certifications are specific to the cloud service provider. So while in many ways, I think it does give you a solid understanding of the theoretical, I do think that what you're alluding to is perhaps you get to become very specialized in a specific subset of tools that are specific to that cloud service provider. Now, that's fantastic, but there's still, like you mentioned, there's so much in tech. So given that, what would you recommend for someone who is trying to get into this field?
I think it depends a lot on the conditions you're coming from. So for example, I do mentoring with different people, and some people ask me, "Hey Daniel, what do I need to break into tech, or how do I or break into cloud or whatever," right? And I like to ask them personal questions before, not necessarily because, like I just kind of need to have the whole picture in order for me to provide advice. So for example, like in my case, I came from a non-technical background, meaning I didn't have a university degree. So that means I had to approach the certification route and also approach a bit of a, like, I would say like a unconventional way of getting into a job. More like, for example, if I were to submit, when I submitted like CVs and stuff, I submitted over 300 CVs and it was a bit hard to get a job, right? So that didn't work out for me because, like if even nowadays, for example, or even back in the day, people would filter a CV within a minute or two. They see you don't have like a university background in terms of like computer science or something, and they would immediately dismiss you. Now with AI, that also can be the case. However, so it depends how is your background. If you went to a normal traditional university, computer science and stuff, then that's good for you. The certifications can help you learn a bit more into the cloud provider or there are certain certifications that they're generic and certain certifications that are specific, right? So for example, we're talking the AWS ones, they're more specific to AWS, right? So then those can help you open the door and then towards certain interviews and stuff. And then you feel free to apply with your CV and so on to companies because you already have like the background and stuff. If you're somebody who doesn't have background in tech, but you have background in something else and you do some sort of career shift to tech, learning the certifications is really advantageous because you don't have like a university degree when it comes to tech. And then by learning these certifications and coupling with hands-on, right, by doing certain personal projects and so on, that can give you a good chance to land a tech interview and then, hopefully your first tech job and stuff. So, and if you're
Perfect,
already,
brother.
let's
Yeah.
say, if you're already professional, so you already know, there are people that have been in tech for like 10, 15 years and they're just learning cloud. Yeah, going to the certification will be much, much more easy for you. So yeah, it becomes much easier for you to get into the cloud.
I want to pivot a little bit here and talk about something else that you mentioned, because I can tell you one of the things that I like the most about AWS, and when I first got into that specific community, was precisely the fact that they have a genuine community. And one of the things that you mentioned that you're very much involved in is this community builder program. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? What it entails? How do you get involved? How do you get into this? And ultimately, what exactly is it?
Sure. So community builders, it's somebody who builds community around them. So it's mostly a lot of people that love being part of the community, AWS community, and they just like to build stuff, or they like to help others, or they like to talk about different things, different technologies and so on. So, and it's also like a good environment for people to feel where they belong, right? When you're amongst peers that they all love cloud and they all work with AWS and so on, and you just come around and bouncing ideas on different things and helping each other, when I feel like that helps a lot. So basically it's a community of people that are passionate about AWS. How do you get in there are applications. So you make an application for the program and stuff, and then based on the application, they do have certain requirements, like to submit some sort of article that you've done, or any sort of blog, video blog or something related to tech or to AWS. And then just kind of based on the application, if you're admitted, you gain certain benefits, like you get some sort of credits for trying building on AWS different projects or trying different services. You get some AWS certification voucher. You get to be part of like talk to AWS experts and be part of certain sessions that are related to certain services that shape the future of that service. And you can say, hey, I like the service, but I would like to have this, or I would like it to have this feature and stuff. And sometimes the AWS experts can listen to the community, where is going, and then you can help shape the future of the cloud services and so on.
So I come from a military background, and there's a lot of veterans in my personal community who they get out of the military, and sometimes it's very difficult to find, right? Embracing community, a group of individuals who sort of share a like-minded approach to certain goals, certain endeavors, who are still very sort of getting after it, like absolute go-getters. They're determined, be a part of their own communities to build, like you mentioned. And I think it definitely helped to join another one who is, a community of individuals who, like I mentioned, are actively building, who are actively moving forward in a particular trajectory and constantly wanting to learn more. I think that in and of itself has been a game changer. Now, with regards to you personally, right? So what motivated you to even start in the first place, right? I mean, I feel like tech appeals to a very specific individual. So what about it was it that sparked your interest? Where can you trace that back to?
So I remember before for my tech, I was a taxi driver and I was having a good living and it was pretty all right. But I knew I wanted more from myself. I knew I wanted to overcome my condition and become better. Then with my condition and my situation at that time, I was looking for something that will overcome my condition. I was looking for something that wouldn't bound me for how much I know. So, for example, I would be in certain roles that there's a ceiling where you can't learn much or you can't go more than that. So, like, I was looking for something that it wouldn't bound me to that. I was looking for something that will provide me a decent living in the future, that my job wouldn't go obsolete, and also for something like that I can work remote, that I can work from like different places of the because I love to travel, so I could just work from any other country and so on. So and IT kind of fitted the bill. It was either like business, for example, but that's can involve a major risk. You have to do some sort of stuff or whatever. And then just kind of was like, okay, what skills do I have? And I was like, I don't really have any sort of skills of anything. So, but IT fit the bill. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm just going to start learning IT. And I said to myself, like, and I realized I left at a disadvantage. I was 29, 30 at the time. And I was like, just kind of, well, you know what? But if I learn every day and just kind of do every little step every day, then I would get to somewhere in like 3 to 5 years and so on, right? And so I started learning. I started to just kind of, go through it and be part of the community came where, when I realized that, in order for me to become a cloud engineer, for example, I have to be around them. I have to behave like them. I have to actually have the courage to say out loud, hey, I'm a cloud engineer and so on. So that where it came me the desire to be part of the community. And also I saw the benefit of like not being alone in my journey, learning from others as well, like, with sibling or other people succeeding. And that kind of fueled me. The desire to be part of the community become stronger and stronger. So I decided to be an active part where I don't just read other people posts and so on. I decided to also post my own journey and my own learning and my own observations towards the industry. And yeah, that just kind of went on and like a snowball, just kind of reach out to this level today.
You hit some brilliant points, and I want to elaborate on two in particular. One thing that you said was that this was sort of like a daily endeavor. This wasn't like you started one day and the next day you expected immediate results. This was a little bit at a time for a consistent period of time. Can you speak on that a little bit more on the power of consistency and how you saw that affect you?
Yeah, for sure. So, I realized that when you start something and you've done it for the first time, it's okay to not be good at it, right? It's normal. Like, I started in IT and I didn't know much. So I had to, just Google everything and so on. A little bit today. And then the next day will come. And I was like, okay, as much as I would like to be overnight and gain all this knowledge, I know I cannot. So I have to just kind of be happy with myself, work out this a little bit today, and then a little bit tomorrow, and then a little bit the day after that, and so on. So it became this thing where every day I needed to learn something, right? So like, regardless if it was a Saturday or a Sunday, I just kind of needed every day. And I knew that in time, this will compound to something. 1 year from now, looking back, I might not be, like super high, but when I look back, I'll 100% be more than what I was on day 1 or day 20 or day 30 or something. So I think that was my motivation behind.
And that's critical, right? Because one of the things that I think, we often struggle with is wrapping our heads around precisely what you said, is compounding interests, right? It's very easy to see, or appreciate sort of immediate gratification, but it's a whole nother ballgame when you think, you know what, 2 years, 3 years, 7 years down the line. And that applies to so many things, right? Because it applies not only to your technical domain knowledge, but even something like finances, right? So if I invest this much every day for an extended period of time, like I will see this much yield, this much return in the span of 3, 5, 6, 7 years. It's really hard to wrap your head around that sometimes, but it's evident even in your case, where if you're able to apply yourself consistently for a period of time, you will see the results, but it takes precisely that. It takes consistency. And then
Yep.
another thing that you mentioned was you said, I had to not be afraid to call myself a cloud engineer. Can you elaborate a little bit about that? Because oftentimes I feel like people have this sort of hesitation to sort of assume a role that they might not feel necessarily ready for, right? It's like, at what point can you call yourself a cloud engineer? Or at what point can you say, I've met this threshold where I feel comfortable enough to say this? What was that like for you?
So I think this comes a little bit also from my, like my country and how they do there, right? Usually in my country, or probably in any other country too, people that are called an engineer are people that have a diploma, right? So, you would call yourself an engineer if you went to an engineering school, a university, and then you get a diploma and stuff. But an engineer per se is somebody who builds stuff, who, like does sort of look at sort of things of how can I get there? How can I build this? Understand the trade-offs of, if I build it for speed versus cost and so on. So I feel like just kind of that came after quite a bit because I was already have some sort of certification. I already made some work in the industry, in the tech industry. And I feel like, it did pass a bit of time until I had the courage to say to people, hey, I'm a cloud engineer. But I felt like when I said that, it was a relief, but it was also like the result of all the work that I've put in. It wasn't like, me day one and I call myself an engineer. No, I felt like I had to learn a lot. And sometimes, it's hard to see yourself because, our mind doesn't tend to adapt to the position that we hold that quick, right? So sometimes, you learn and you work and stuff. And then, your mind just kind of has a bit of a trouble adapting as quick as you do stuff. But I feel like that was some proud moment and a moment that I felt like all my work was, like helping and coming to this point of me defining myself as a cloud engineer.
So one of the things that I feel like a lot of people tend to have to confront is this idea of whether or not you need a degree or you do not need a degree. Now, granted, this is one of those things where it's, it's certainly dependent on everyone's path, the route that they want to take. And in no way, shape, or form am I advocating for not getting or getting one. What I am, however, advocating is this idea of identity. It's like actively working towards achieving a certain goal, achieving a certain. So all these different aspects are still applied regardless of whether you have a document that attests to a certain thing. All that to say, while I think that there are some fields that certainly should require a very, very formalized education, more often than not things like medicine or stuff like that. But at the same time, AI in particular has democratized knowledge and the ability to learn. So it'll be interesting to see how we approach that. But what's your opinion on education? Do you think that it's evolving? Do you think that it has evolved? Do you think it's going to continue to change over time? Or what's your take on that?
So, I had this debate with myself when I started tech, and I was thinking like, would it be better to go to a university and approach that or study on my own? And at that time, I've already been through one university and I've already kind of seen how things are and stuff. And as you said, I'm not against universities or something, but I feel like universities, a lot of you pay for something, a course that is synthesized into like, all the materials that you need to learn. And then you have a professor that will explain to you how all this come together through his opinion and through his expertise. And then you take an exam. And then based on that, you will say, yeah, you have the knowledge and stuff. Certifications are the same, but it's like, there's no professor. You learn on your own, right? And I kind of felt like, hey, I can do that too. I can learn on my own and then just kind of take on my own pace too, because sometimes the university can be too quick for some people. They need more time to understand certain things. So I was like, I'm going to take my own pace and I'm going to learn this and I'm going to do it in my own way, right? So that's why I love the approach of the certification versus the university. But again, I'm not against this. Some it has its benefits and some people go for that and that's fine. But for me, that's kind of what it worked, right? I wanted to understand myself. I wanted to stop when I needed to understand certain things, or if I'm more interested into that, usually most cases in a university course, you can't deviate from it. You just be like, hey, but we have to hit certain points and get towards the end of the semester, and so on. But sometimes I would stop and look at something else and so on. So I was kind of like, being my own student and teacher. So I feel for me that worked well. So yeah.
So one of the things that I've noticed in particular is I think it applies really well in tech. One of the most unique ways that I learned how to start building on the cloud was through actually doing it. Right? Once you actually get in there and you get into the console or you tap into your CLI, that terrifying terminal the first time that you pull that thing up, all these different things, you learn over time and you make mistakes, you iterate and you progress from that. So let's go back to perhaps like whatever you recall being your first build. Do you have any idea? Like, do you recall what that was, what you were trying to build, and kind of what you wanted to get out of it?
Yeah. So I remember it was a hands-on lab. So I used to do this labs on this platforms and stuff. And then some of the things that were like just traditional, like build a website type of thing. But one thing that kind of really connected to me a bit was that I remember it was like a Saturday morning. It was 6 a.m. And sometimes I would wake up early in the morning to do some of the work because I would be uninterrupted and I could focus. And I remember I was doing this like lab where you would build some sort of server, and then based on the some of the alerts, you'll get like a notification on your phone, right? That something's wrong and so on. So, and I've done this, I build this, and then I see this SMS coming, and you can customize the message and so on, and say something like, "Hey, your server has high CPU" or something coming through my phone from something I did on the laptop. It felt a little bit of like real, as in like, hey, this is like real stuff, right? And for me at that moment, I was like mesmerized of like how much you can do with it, and how like real can feel technology. Because before that, you just kind of see abstract things on the screen and so on. So like you'll build a VPC and you'll build a server and so on. So like a VPC, it's like more like a private network, but without seeing like real servers, without doing any sort of networking wires and so on, like back in the days, right? So it just kind of felt a lot of like, abstract. But again, that connection with, an SMS coming to my phone from a server online and so on, then kind of felt like something like real, something like, it clicks here. So yeah.
I think one of the famous quotes that reminds me of is any sufficiently let me look it up here. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And that was one of the things that actually struck me too. Like when I first started building, I was like, especially, and I will say, especially with AI and using that as a tool, I was like, the possibilities are actually endless. And I feel like you don't really come to that conclusion until you sit down and build the first thing that you really set your mind to. Because in many ways what it feels like, it's just sort of like there's this layer of abstraction, right? You're sitting in front of your monitor, you're typing in a set of keys, and all of a sudden you're getting these real life, real time renderings. And
Yep.
you're just like, I'm actively interacting with this technology. I'm going from, an idea in my mind, projecting it onto a desktop, onto a screen, and it's taking sort of like a less amorphous and more real-time form, by interacting with it and having an effect in the real world. And I think that's a pivotal moment where you really start to see the power of technology and how, even as an individual, you're able to apply it. And I think that was particularly fascinating to me. So for you, let's fast forward now a few years. You start from your first lab, and now you've progressed through multiple different certifications. You're a community builder. You're doing all these different things involved with AWS. How do you feel like your projects have evolved from your first one to what you're doing now?
Oh man, it's kind of like astronomical, because at the beginning you only think to do the little thing that, to just kind of look to make it work. Now you're thinking everything at the big picture, there's the well different areas in terms of like, cool, I build this. How do I maintain it? How do I easy update it? How do I exchange certain pieces and make it more modular? There's so many things you have to have, like in your mind when you build something. And I think this kind of just goes towards more like system architecture, and just kind of learn from like different sort of trade-offs and learn different sort of options you have when you build a system. So yeah, I think, yeah, they got more complex because now you have more awareness of what are the possibilities. And the more you know, the more you just kind of like need to make a decision on this. I like to use the analogy usually like, if somebody wants to make an omelet and they know exactly what an omelet is, and it's just kind of like, okay, I need to put some eggs, I want to put some meat for protein, and I want to put a little bit of vegetables or something. And then I just kind of make an omelet, right? Or whatever. Or it can be just a plain omelet, right? But if somebody wants, it's kind of like they know exactly the ingredients they need, right? But if somebody wants to evolve on an omelet, right, they will gather, let's say, like 10, 15 different ingredients, and they will analyze all of them, and they'll be like, I'm going to pick this, this, and this because this, provides me enhanced flavoring. This provides me like more protein and so on. So like instead of like knowing exactly the three elements, they look at 15 elements and they kind of think which one works best with each other, and then which one complements each other, and then choose from that. So that's kind of the difference in my opinion.
I think that's a brilliant analogy, man. On that topic, let's talk about one of these ingredients that everybody's been talking about, artificial intelligence. Now, granted, it's been around for a lot longer than people give it credit, but it's only just now become popular. How have you applied it? What are your thoughts on it? How has it impacted your work as a cloud engineer?
So I've been using AI pretty much since it became mainstream with the ChatGPT and so on. At the beginning, I was just more like intrigued of what it can do, and I've used in certain little projects for sort of automations and so on. Used to interact with it. Now I feel it becomes much better, much more useful. There's still much more companies develop products on AI and so on. So it's definitely becoming more and more mainstream, and I'm sure we will see a lot more in 2026 from it too. What I see and what it kind of does to us, in my opinion, in cloud engineering, it definitely speeds up our execution. It definitely speeds up like how we do our work. However, it does eliminate the process of thought, in my opinion. So, I would find like initially, for example, when I was, when I was like 2021, 2022, even though AI just appeared around there and stuff, it was just more like, I still had to look things for myself, look through documentation and just kind of try to understand things by myself. Now I feel like, if I would need, for example, some sort of script or something, I would just go quickly on AI and say, hey, create me this. And then it will create me this. I will apply it. I will try it out. Then it will give me some error. Then I bounce back the error to the AI. And then it will say, yeah, I oversee this. And then let me remake this. And I would apply it again. And then again, it wouldn't work and so on. So like it will be this ping pong match where my level of logic is not applied anymore. It's more like I'm the middleman between this, right? Which I cannot say I really like, because as I said, like, you build your skills on this capabilities of search for what you want, knowing what are the possibilities, and not just expect somebody that hand you over everything on a silver platter, right? So I feel like even though it speed up things, it does decrease our capability to look for information, understand what we're looking at, and so on.
Okay, so now with that being said, how do you forecast that continuing to evolve, right? Because, one of the more controversial topics has been whether or not artificial intelligence is going to virtually eradicate any and all, entry level jobs, be it white collar, blue collar, whatever that may be. I feel like, even on the software side of things, perhaps some cloud engineering, whatever it may be, there's this idea that AI, when untethered, could take a lot of these jobs. Having been at reInvent, I think one of the things that the CTO specifically alluded to was precisely that, whether or not AI will take your job. He said basically, yes, if you let it, right? Essentially,
Yeah.
it was like it could, in theory, take your job, but is it going to erase you? Is it going to basically make you obsolete? That, he said, no. So how do you feel AI is going to fundamentally change a lot of these entry level jobs into cloud, into software, into tech?
I think if we look at big picture, like AI, will and most of the jobs, if they get kind of obsolete, is through like automations or through understanding and so on. So for example, I'll give you an example where there's some sort of warehouses where you used to work lots of people to deliver packages and put them on the right lane towards on the trucks that goes towards a certain region and so on. Now they're like, where they used to be 100, 200 people, now they're like 4, 6, 8 people handling lots of robots, right? That does the work for them. And then for sure, in our industry too, they're going to be like, if you need a simple function or whatever, AI can help you with that. So then you don't need that junior engineer anymore to be there. Or like, if like many things been already automated and it's much easier to do, then, like less people with basic skills are needed and more people with complex skills are needed, right? However, we were juniors too, and even people which they have the complex skills, they all were also junior too at some point, right? So they learned one from another. I think it's not necessarily about, like it's more about adapting to the conditions, right? So it's more like, people entry level jobs might not be, a thing. So it could be where an entry level becomes a mid level, right? But that already kind of has some sort of knowledge and some sort of AI knowledge and automation and so on. So, it will still be somebody who learns enough to get an entry job somewhere. So it's not about like entry jobs will get eliminated per se. However, it will be different and more challenging, right? Because now you need to do so much more to demonstrate your ability to have like an entry level role in IT compared to what it was before. So yeah.
Yeah, but one of the things that I like to argue often is the fact that at the end of the day, right, there's still a degree of subject matter expertise and human nuance that people bring to the table, right? And the analogy that I typically like to make, or sort of the example, if you will, is me personally. It comes to like drawing, that is not my area of expertise at all. It's just not. I'm not good at it, man. As much as I've tried, it's just not my thing. So if I were to, have to prompt, say, the new Nano Banana Pro on Gemini to try to recreate some sort of, Renaissance art, right? I just would not know really how to do it. I mean, I could kind of piece my way through something, but, let's say I introduce a art history major or someone who has true, genuine expertise in that field. All of a sudden, they're going to have a much deeper sort of domain knowledge that they can articulate precisely what it is that they want rendered in real life. And I can virtually guarantee you that the product that they come up with is going to be infinitely better than mine. So all that to basically ask you is, what do you feel, or what do you think humans have that machines will never be able to reproduce?
I would like to think that, like we have its, I would say, personality. So, like different human is different. And then we have our own unique traits, which I think makes us human. Also, our capacity of connecting many, many different things. So again, when you put it in the context of AI, probably AI is capable of doing lots of connections too, but we do it in a personal way compared to an AI in a programmable way, right? So I think that will be something. Soft skills is something that humans usually, the personality, like connecting with one another and so on. So becoming personal on a level, not necessarily just, like in business, but also personally, like as colleagues and so on. So I feel like that kind of will always be there, and we're always gonna do ability to take decisions based on different sort of things. I think it's also something that will still be needed. I feel like AI will be good for doing the legwork, and then we will take the decision on, is this good for us or not? So I feel like that's kind of how I would see this running in the future.
I think that's a great point too, because I think if I had to sort of put one word on it, would be something like liability, right? And it's like, we human carbon based biological organisms, like we live with our decisions, right? Like our life is you know, quite clearly finite, right? So we have to make decisions given a finite amount of time that will ultimately affect us throughout it, right? Whereas like AI, it's iterative and it's also ephemeral in its memory. So none of the decisions that it actively makes, I mean, it's hard to even tell whether it's aware of the decisions. I would argue it's not, but it also doesn't have to necessarily deal with the consequences, right? So we still have that, right? So it weighs on us, which adds value, right? We always value liability because basically what you're taking on is the responsibility for what that system does or fails to do. And when you're able to assume that degree of responsibility, you're basically standing on the front line and saying, I stand by this. And I think that's a critical aspect of humanity that is very difficult to replicate. And that's the weight on the shoulders of an individual who's actively standing on behalf of a system, of an organization, of a group of individuals. And I think that goes a long way. Let's pivot a little bit here. And as we kind of move towards the future, right? So we talked a little bit about, what AI has done, how it's sort of affected and it's continuing to affect cloud engineering, jobs, all these different aspects of life. Let's look into 2026. What do you think AI will look like by this time next year?
So I see a lot of like buzzword agentic, been thrown around in the AI. So I feel like there's going to be a lot of like so-called agents that does this work for us based on a specific task. So you will train a AI model to do certain things, and then he will become like some sort of expert to that. I've also see a lot of like speech to speech type agents. So, people phone some sort of, regardless if it's a call center or like a booking thing, and it will just like an AI will talk to you and so on. And it will try to make it itself indistinguishable from a human, and it will try to help you with the queries and stuff. So yeah, I feel like that can be something. I think in 2026 we're gonna see a lot of like this, like what's gonna stick to it. But the industry shifts so quick that there might be this, there might be something new appear, and we don't really know, because at the moment there's a lot of like new ideas, as you say, that come across, and there's a lot of ways to prove the return on investment when it comes to AI technologies, because at the moment I feel like there's a lot of like investment towards it, but we don't get as much back from as we would like to when it comes to AI per se. Sure, it does cut processes, it lowers the timing on certain things and stuff, but the amount it costs us, it's more than what we're getting back in return. So I think like some optimization will be done towards that in the end, but at the same time, it will be more like more mainstream, and then hopefully it will be more useful to us as humans in general, in all category, not just in tech, but in all other different, like distribution or medical systems and so on. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, right? Where it's important to make a distinction between, like a cool demo and something that you can be like, hey, check this out. I build this, in a couple hours versus a system that you expect a certain level of consistency and deployed in production, right? So can you talk to our audience a little bit about what that means, right? So for something to be out in production.
So yeah, usually demos are quick to showcase some sort of value. However, when it comes to production, there's a lot of things that are involved. So then we need to make sure that the systems, as you said, do not fail. If they fail, they have some sort of fallback mechanism, and then maybe some self-healing capabilities. And then, like there is this concept called human in the loop that sometimes in production there's a lot of like companies that approach. Probably an example will be like, for example, self-driving car will still have like a driver to take control in case of something else goes wrong. It could be maybe a physical or like a remote driver or something, but it will still have somebody already there. And exactly with this AI too, as much as we would like them to be as autonomous as possible, we still need some sort of fallback mechanism, reliability, all this kind of be cost efficient too. So just kind of all this to be ready in production and say, okay, yeah, this is like good enough and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it goes without saying that there's definitely a lot to look forward to here as we come to a close in 2025 and start looking into 2026. You're absolutely right that the big word that's getting thrown around there is agents, agentic AI. I'll be really excited to see what that actually looks like. What it actually evolves into and how widespread these sort of more autonomous AI agents begin to operate, or how they begin to operate in our daily life. But Daniel, man, it's been an absolute pleasure, man. I wanna start closing up here and ask you, what are you currently working on? Is there something in particular that you're really proud of that you want to showcase, or something that you want to encourage the audience to go check out? Please, by all means, let our audience know.
So for me, as much as I look in the industry out there and I feel there's a lot of people talking about the tech per se, right? As in here's what you can do with this AI model, here's what you can do with this technology and so on. However, I feel like, not a lot of people talk about the people in tech, what they need, how they need to be, the soft skill required, the leadership skills required to be in tech and so on. Because we have to remember that tech is about the people. So tech is like really focused around the people, and we are building something. So then we have to look at ourselves, how we can be best humans we can be. And then by developing soft skills, by developing leadership capabilities is really important. So I've kind of taken my mission to spread the word around on this and help people improve on their soft skills and on their leadership skills. As I said, I do mentor others and I do talk about this kind of subjects. I also have like a small YouTube channel. It's called Daniel Gaina under my name, and then just kind of talk about the different things that people feel. One of my latest videos is about imposter syndrome. So then people know how to navigate that, what it means to feel that in IT and so on. So yeah, my mission is to focus on the people in tech, not on the tech per se.
And I do want to add, I watched your video on imposter syndrome, and yes, the audience, I highly recommend that you check out his channel. It will absolutely be posted in the description of this video. But Daniel, thank you so much, man. I genuinely appreciate your time. I appreciate all your effort. I think I've made this abundantly clear. One of the things that struck me about you is your dedication to this cause, your dedication to the field of cloud engineering, and your dedication to community. I think those those aspects are critical, in leaders that are going to lead the way as we move into agentic AI and the ever evolving field of cloud engineering and artificial intelligence. So it really is an honor and a pleasure to have somebody like yourself on the show. And I know for a fact that the audience is going to get a lot from what you have to say. So again, thank you so much, brother. It's been an absolute pleasure. To everyone that's here on the show, please follow Daniel Gaina on his YouTube video. I'll post his LinkedIn. I'll post basically all of his social media accounts. So definitely give him a follow. Keep up with all the work that he's doing. If you're in or around his area, definitely go check out his community builder sessions. And yeah, this has been another episode of the Vector Podcast. Keep building, and I will catch you on the next one.